The sharp crack of Zara Etherbridge's hand across his daughter's face echoed through the weathered barn like a gunshot. Zara Etherbridge crumpled to the hay-strewn floor, her wheat blonde hair falling in disarray around her shoulders as blood trickled from her split lip. It was 1878 in Redemption Creek, Wyoming Territory, and for the 19-year-old daughter of the wealthiest rancher in the county, life had never felt more precarious. "I forbid it," Zachariah roared, towering over her trembling form. "No daughter of mine will disgrace our name by associating with that penniless drifter. You'll marry Senator Whitlock's son as arranged, or by God, you'll have no place in this family." Zara's blue eyes flashed defiance through her tears. "I won't marry James Whitlock. I don't love him, Father." "Love?" Zachariah spat the word like it was poison. "What does love have to do with building an empire? The Whitlock connection will double our holdings. Your duty is to this family." When Zara rose shakily to her feet, her father's rage escalated. The next blow caught her temple, sending her sprawling against the rough-hewn support beam. Pain exploded behind her eyes as warm blood began streaming down her face from the gash above her brow. "You'll stay here until you come to your senses," Zachariah snarled, turning toward the barn door. "Perhaps a night without supper will help you reconsider your foolishness." The heavy door slammed shut, followed by the ominous click of the padlock. Zara slumped to the ground, her vision blurring as blood continued to flow from her wounds. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through cracks in the barn walls, illuminating dancing dust motes as darkness began to encroach on her consciousness. She wasn't sure how much time had passed when the sound of splintering would jolted her back to awareness. The barn door swung open, revealing a tall silhouette backlit by the setting sun. "Miss Etherbridge?" A deep voice, rough around the edges but gentle in tone, called out. Sweet, merciful heaven! Garrett Irons, the new foreman from the neighboring Fletcher ranch, dropped to his knees beside her. His weathered hands hovered uncertainly over her bloodied form before gently brushing matted hair from her face. "I heard the commotion when I was riding by," he explained, his hazel eyes filled with concern. "Can you stand, Miss Etherbridge?" Zara tried to speak, but her words slurred together as another wave of dizziness washed over her. Without hesitation, Garrett slipped one arm beneath her knees and another around her shoulders, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. "I've got you now," he murmured, cradling her against his chest. "You're mine to protect. I won't let anyone hurt you again." The words, spoken with such fierce conviction, penetrated through Zara's haze of pain. As Garrett carried her toward his waiting horse, she surrendered to unconsciousness, feeling, for the first time that day, safe. Garrett Irons had not planned on becoming entangled in the affairs of the Etherbridge family when he'd ridden past their sprawling ranch that evening. At 32, he'd spent most of his adult life drifting across the Western Territories, working cattle drives from Texas to Montana, until Fletcher had offered him the foreman position 6 months prior. He'd planned to stay just long enough to save for his own spread, avoiding complications and connections. Yet here he was, riding hard toward Doc Sullivan's house on the edge of town, with Zachariah Etherbridge's battered daughter held protectively against his chest. Her blood had soaked through his blue cotton shirt, her breathing shallow but steady. "Stay with me, Miss Etherbridge," he urged, feeling her stir slightly. "Just a little further now." When Doc Sullivan opened his door, the older man's bushy white eyebrows shot up in alarm. "Bring her in quick, Irons. What in tarnation happened?" "Her father," Garrett replied grimly, following the doctor into his examination room. "I found her locked in their barn, bleeding and half-conscious." The doctor's expression darkened as he examined the young woman. "Lay her here. I've treated Zara since she was a child, but this..." He shook his head sadly. Zachariah's temper has worsened since his wife passed. Still, I never thought he'd go this far. As the doctor cleaned and stitched Zara's wounds, Garrett paced the small waiting area, his jaw clenched tight. He'd known men like Zara Etherbridge before, wealthy ranchers who viewed their children as property, tools for expanding their empires. The thought made his blood boil. An hour later, Doc Sullivan emerged, wiping his hands on a cloth. She'll live. For stitches on her brow, bruised ribs, and a mild concussion. She's asking for you. Garrett removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair before entering the room. Zara lay on the examination table, her golden hair fanned out around her pale face. The stark white bandage on her forehead made the purpling bruise on her cheek stand out even more vividly. "Mr. Irons," she whispered, her voice stronger than he expected. "Thank you for helping me." "Miss Etherbridge," he acknowledged with a nod. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been trampled by a particularly vindictive bull." She attempted a smile, wincing as it pulled at her split lip. "Please call me Zara." "Garrett," he offered in return. Then, more seriously, "Your father will come looking for you." Fear flickered across her face, but she lifted her chin defiantly. "I'm not going back." "Do you have somewhere to go? Family? Friends?" Zara shook her head slightly. "Father has discouraged close friendships, and Mother's family is back east." Tears welled in her eyes. "I have some money saved, but you'll come with me," Garrett decided, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "I have a cabin on Fletcher land. It's small, but you'll be safe there until we figure something out." "Why would you do that for a stranger?" she asked, studying his face with wary blue eyes. Garrett considered her question carefully. "Because 17 years ago, my sister was in a similar situation. No one helped her." He swallowed hard. "I won't make the same mistake twice." After a moment's hesitation, Zara nodded. "Thank you." Doc Sullivan agreed to keep Zara's whereabouts secret, providing her with medication for pain and promising to check on her in a few days. As twilight deepened into night, Garrett helped her onto his horse, mounting behind her and keeping one arm securely around her waist as they rode toward the Fletcher ranch. "Will your employer mind?" Zara asked, her voice barely audible over the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. "Old man Fletcher's a good sort," Garrett assured her. "Lost his own daughter to consumption years back. He'll understand." The cabin sat nestled against a stand of pine trees, simple but well maintained. Inside, Garrett lit a lamp, illuminating the sparse but tidy interior. A small kitchen area, a table with 2 chairs, a modest sitting area with a stone fireplace, and a single bed in the corner. "You take the bed," he said, gathering spare blankets from a trunk. "I'll sleep by the fire." Zara stood uncertainly in the center of the room, suddenly looking very young and lost. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." "There's nothing to repay," Garrett replied, stoking the fire to ward off the night's chill. "Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning." As Zara settled gingerly onto the bed, still fully clothed, Garrett stepped outside onto the small porch. Stars glittered overhead in the vast Wyoming sky as he considered the unexpected turn his life had taken. Taking in Zara Etherbridge's daughter would surely bring trouble, but looking at her bruised face, he knew he couldn't have done anything else. What he didn't fully understand was the fierce protectiveness that had surged through him when he'd found her. He'd helped people in need before. That was just being decent. But something about Zara Etherbridge had awakened something deeper, something he thought he'd buried years ago after Elizabeth had jilted him for a banker back in St. Louis. Garrett shook his head, pushing the thoughts aside. What mattered now was keeping Zara safe from her father's wrath. The rest would sort itself out in time. Dawn broke over the mountains, streaming golden light through the cabin's small windows. Zara awakened slowly, momentarily disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. Pain pulsed through her head as memories of the previous day flooded back her father's rage, the locked barn, and the unexpected rescue by Garrett Irons. She sat up carefully, wincing at the sharp complaint from her ribs. Garrett was nowhere to be seen, but a cup of steaming coffee sat on the table alongside a plate of biscuits. A folded piece of paper leaned against the cup. Zara made her way to the table, unfolding the note written in a surprisingly neat hand. Gone to speak with Fletcher. Back by midday. Rest. Zara sipped the strong coffee gratefully, allowing its warmth to spread through her. Outside, birds sang in the pine trees, a peaceful contrast to the turmoil of her thoughts. What would happen now? Her father wouldn't simply let her disappear. Zara Etherbridge was not a man who accepted defeat, especially not from those he considered his possessions. She touched the stitches at her temple gingerly. Perhaps this time he had gone too far. If she could reach a larger town, maybe Denver or Cheyenne, she could find work as a teacher or shop assistant. Her mother had insisted on a proper education, even hiring tutors from back east. Those skills might finally serve a purpose beyond making her a more appealing marriage prospect. The sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted her planning. Zara tensed, moving toward the window. Relief washed through her at the sight of Garrett dismounting from his chestnut gelding. "How are you feeling?" he asked as he entered, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "Better," she replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear self-consciously. "Thank you for the coffee and biscuits." Garrett nodded, pouring himself a cup before joining her at the table. "I spoke with Fletcher. He's agreed to let you stay as long as needed." "That's very kind of him." "There's more," Garrett continued, his expression serious. "Your father came to town this morning, looking for you. He's telling folks you were injured when a horse spooked and you hit your head. Says you were confused and wandered off." Anger flashed in Zara's eyes. "Of course he is. Heaven forbid anyone know the great Zara Etherbridge beats his daughter. He's offering a $100 reward for information on your whereabouts," Garrett added grimly. "That's a lot of money around these parts." Zara's shoulders slumped. "I should leave. I'm putting you and Mr. Fletcher at risk." "No." Garrett's response was immediate and firm. "Fletcher suggested something else. His sister runs a boarding house in Denver. He's written to her about a position for you, if you're interested." Hope flickered in Zara's chest. "I could go to Denver?" "In a few weeks, when you're healed and things have quieted down," Garrett confirmed. "Until then, you'll stay here where it's safe." "Why are you helping me?" Zara asked again, studying his face, the strong jawline softened by a day's growth of beard, the crow's feet at the corners of his hazel eyes, the small scar that bisected his right eyebrow. Garrett was silent for a long moment. "When I was 15, my father caught my sister Catherine with a young man from the neighboring farm. He beat her so badly she lost the child she was carrying. No one intervened, not even our mother." His knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. "Catherine died of her injuries 3 days later. I left home that night and never returned." Zara reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "I'm so sorry. It was a long time ago," he said, though the pain in his eyes suggested otherwise. "But when I saw you lying there in that barn," he shook his head, "I couldn't walk away." For several heartbeats, their hands remained connected, a silent understanding passing between them. Then Garrett cleared his throat, standing abruptly. "I need to check the north pasture fence. Will you be all right alone for a few hours?" Zara nodded, drawing her hand back. "I'll be fine." After he left, she moved around the cabin, taking in the details of Garrett's life books stacked neatly on a shelf, mostly history and a few dog-eared novels. A carved wooden horse on the mantel, a guitar in the corner gathering dust. It was the home of a solitary man, but one with unexpected depths. The next 2 weeks established a routine of sorts. Garrett left early each morning for his duties as foreman, returning at midday to check on Zara before heading out again until evening. He brought news from town, including the unsettling information that Zachariah had hired men to search the surrounding areas. Zara kept busy in the cabin, cooking meals, mending Garrett's shirts, and reading his books. Her physical wounds healed steadily under Doc Sullivan's occasional supervision, but her heart remained uncertain. Denver represented safety and a new beginning, yet the thought of leaving Garrett created an unexpected ache. They talked during evening meals, sharing stories of their lives. Zara spoke of her mother, a gentle woman from Boston who had married Zachariah when he was still a struggling rancher with big dreams, only to wither under the weight of his ambition. Garrett described his years on the trail, the characters he'd met, the vast landscapes he'd crossed. "Have you never wanted to settle in one place?" Zara asked one evening as they sat before the fire. "To build something lasting?" Garrett stared into the flames. "That was the plan eventually. Save enough for my own land." He shrugged. "Never seemed to be the right time. And now?" His eyes met hers across the flickering light. "Now I'm not sure what I want." The tension between them grew with each passing day, unacknowledged but undeniable. It lived in the careful way they avoided touching, in the lingering glances when one thought the other wasn't looking, in the comfortable silences that stretched between them. Zara knew it was dangerous, this growing attachment. She had nothing to offer him but complications. And yet, she found herself watching for his return each day, her heart quickening at the sound of his horse approaching. One afternoon, Garrett returned earlier than expected, his expression troubled. "Your father came to the Fletcher ranch today," he announced without preamble. "He's offering Fletcher twice the market value for his land." Zara paled. "He's trying to flush me out." "Fletcher turned him down flat," Garrett assured her. "But Zachariah mentioned he's heard rumors you might be in the area. We need to move you, at least temporarily." "Where?" "There's a line shack in the high pasture. It's basic, but no one would think to look there this time of year." They gathered essentials quickly: food, blankets, Zara's few belongings. As dusk approached, they rode double on Garrett's horse, following a narrow trail into the foothills. The line shack was indeed basic, a single room with a small stove, a rough table, and a narrow cot, but it offered shelter and secrecy. "I'll return tomorrow with more supplies," Garrett promised, hesitating at the door. "Will you be all right alone?" "I'll be fine," Zara assured him, though the thought of the isolated night ahead made her uneasy. "Thank you, Garrett." He nodded, his hand lingering on the doorframe. For a moment, it seemed he might say something more, but instead, he touched the brim of his hat and disappeared into the gathering darkness. Alone, Zara lit the single lantern and stoked a small fire in the stove. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, an eerie counterpoint to her thoughts. She had never been truly alone before, always surrounded by servants at the ranch, always under her father's watchful eye. The night stretched endlessly, sleep elusive as every creak and rustle startled her to alertness. When dawn finally broke, she was sitting by the window, watching as the mountains emerged from shadow into golden light. The sound of approaching horses, multiple horses, sent her heart racing. Peering cautiously through the window, she saw not Garrett's familiar figure but 3 men on horseback, rifles visible across their saddles. One she recognized as Johnson, her father's foreman. Panic surged through her. How had they found her? Had someone betrayed her whereabouts? She glanced frantically around the cabin, looking for an escape route or weapon. The only option was a small rear window. As the men dismounted, Zara squeezed through the window, wincing as her still tender ribs protested. She ran crouched low through the trees, her breathing harsh in her ears. Behind her, she heard the cabin door crash open, followed by angry shouts as they discovered her absence. She ran blindly, pushing through underbrush, slipping on pine needles, her only thought to put distance between herself and her pursuers. The crack of a rifle froze her momentarily, though the shot went wide, splintering bark from a tree several feet away. "There she is," Johnson's voice carried through the trees. "Zara Etherbridge, your father wants you home." Renewed fear propelled her forward. She scrambled down a steep incline, losing her footing and tumbling the last few yards. Pain shot through her ankle as she landed awkwardly, but adrenaline pushed her back to her feet. The sound of running water guided her to a shallow stream. She splashed across, hoping to obscure her trail, and continued her desperate flight. The voices behind her grew fainter, but she dared not slow her pace. She didn't see the fallen log until it was too late. Her injured ankle gave way as she tried to jump over it, sending her crashing to the forest floor. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, and for several terrifying seconds, she couldn't move. When she finally managed to push herself up, she realized she had no idea where she was. The forest looked the same in every direction, endless pines stretching up toward the sky. Worse, her ankle throbbed painfully, barely able to support her weight. Limping, using trees for support, Zara continued moving in what she hoped was the opposite direction from her pursuers. The morning sun provided some orientation, but without a clear path, she was essentially wandering. Hours passed. Her mouth grew dry with thirst, her ankle swollen and increasingly painful. When she heard hoofbeats again, despair washed over her. She had no strength left to run. "Zara!" Garrett's voice, urgent and worried, called through the trees. Relief made her knees buckle. "Here!" she croaked, her voice barely audible. "Garrett, I'm here." She heard him dismount, followed by the sound of boots crashing through underbrush. When he appeared before her, his face was drawn with concern. "Thank God," he breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands cupped her face, eyes searching for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "My ankle," she managed. "Father's men, they found the shack." "I know," he interrupted grimly. "I intercepted them on my way back. Fletcher's men are dealing with them now." His thumb gently brushed dirt from her cheek. "I thought I'd lost you." The raw emotion in his voice broke something loose inside her. Tears spilled down her cheeks as weeks of fear and uncertainty overwhelmed her. Garrett pulled her against his chest, holding her as she sobbed. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe now. You're mine to protect, remember?" When her tears subsided, he helped her onto his horse, mounting behind her and holding her securely as they rode back toward his cabin. The solid warmth of his chest against her back was the most comforting thing she'd ever felt. "What happens now?" she asked as the cabin came into view. Garrett's arms tightened slightly around her. "Fletcher received a reply from his sister in Denver. The position is yours whenever you're ready." Zara nodded, ignoring the hollow feeling the words created. Denver meant safety, a new beginning. It was what she had wanted. So why did it suddenly feel like another kind of loss? That evening, after Garrett had bandaged her ankle, and she had washed away the dirt and tears of her ordeal, they sat at the table sharing a simple meal of beans and cornbread. "I leave for Denver in 2 days," she announced, watching his face carefully. "Mr. Fletcher has arranged an escort." Garrett nodded, his expression unreadable. "It's for the best. You'll be safe there, beyond your father's reach." "Yes," she agreed, looking down at her plate. "For the best." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Garrett cleared his throat. "I've been thinking." he began, his voice rougher than usual. Maybe it's time I moved on as well. Zara's head snapped up. You're leaving the Fletcher ranch? I've saved most of my wages these past few years, he said, not quite meeting her eyes. Enough for a small spread of my own. There's good land available in Colorado. Hope fluttered in her chest. Colorado. Now he looked at her directly, his gaze intense. Near Denver, if that matters to you. It matters, she whispered, her heart racing. Garrett reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Zara, I know we've only known each other a short while, and I have little to offer compared to what you're used to. I don't care about that, she interrupted, squeezing his hand. My father's wealth brought me nothing but misery. I can't promise riches, Garrett continued, but I can promise you'll never have reason to fear me. I can promise to work every day to build something good for us. And I can promise that you'll always be your own woman, never someone's possession. Tears blurred Zara's vision. Those are the only promises that matter. Garrett stood, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. One hand came up to cradle her face, thumb brushing lightly over her healed lip. I never expected to find you, he murmured. I'd given up on this kind of feeling. So had I, Zara admitted, her hands resting against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I didn't think it was possible to feel safe and exhilarated at the same time. When he lowered his mouth to hers, the kiss was gentle, mindful of her still healing injuries, yet filled with a promise of deeper passion to come. Zara's arms slid around his neck, drawing him closer as something bright and hopeful unfurled within her. They left for Denver 2 days later, traveling with Fletcher's most trusted men. Zara carried a letter of introduction to Mrs. Eleanor Bishop, Fletcher's sister, who welcomed them warmly to her boarding house on a tree-lined street near the center of the growing city. My brother speaks highly of you both, the silver-haired woman said, showing them to a comfortable parlor. He's quite insistent that I help however I can. We're grateful, Garrett replied, his hat in his hands. Zara needs a safe place while I secure our future. Mrs. Bishop's sharp eyes missed nothing, including the way Zara's hand rested in the crook of Garrett's arm. And what future might that be, Mr. Irons? A small ranch outside the city, he answered. And a marriage if Zara will have me. The older woman's expression softened. I see. Well, Miss Etherbridge will be quite safe here, and I happen to know the county clerk rather well. He might be persuaded to expedite certain paperwork. Within a month, Garrett had purchased 80 acres of promising land 30 miles outside Denver. It wasn't much compared to the vast Etherbridge holdings, but it was theirs, a place to build from nothing but honest work and shared dreams. They married in Mrs. Bishop's parlor, Zara wearing a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, Garrett in the only suit he owned. Their witnesses were Mrs. Bishop, her husband, and a letter from Old Man Fletcher offering his heartfelt congratulations. I take you as my wife, Garrett vowed, his voice steady as he slipped a modest gold band onto her finger. Not to possess but to cherish, not to command but to partner with. From this day forward, you are my home, wherever we may be. Zara's vision blurred with tears as she repeated similar words. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared tasted of promise and new beginnings. Their small ranch house took shape over that first summer, built by Garrett's hands with help from neighbors. It wasn't grand, just 4 rooms and a front porch, but to Zara, it was a palace compared to her father's mansion. News eventually reached them that Zachariah Etherbridge had suffered a stroke, leaving him partially paralyzed. The empire he had built began to crumble under mismanagement, and by the following spring, he had been forced to sell half his holdings to cover debts. Do you want to go back? Garrett asked when the letter from Doc Sullivan arrived with this news. He is still your father. Zara shook her head, her hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her belly. My family is here now. As their first anniversary approached, their ranch had begun to show promise. 6 cows, a small vegetable garden, and a contract to supply beef to 2 Denver hotels gave them a modest but sustainable income. More importantly, they had built a home filled with laughter, music from Garrett's no longer dusty guitar, and the quiet companionship of 2 people who had found in each other exactly what they needed. On a warm evening in late spring, they sat together on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and pink. Any regrets? Garrett asked, his hand covering hers where it rested on her rounded belly. About leaving your old life behind? Zara leaned her head against his shoulder, considering the question seriously. I think about my mother sometimes, and what she might think of my choices. She stayed, even when father changed from the man she married into someone colder, more driven. She didn't have the options you did, Garrett pointed out gently. No, Zara agreed, and that's why I don't regret leaving. She taught me to value myself, even if she couldn't do the same. She smiled up at him. Besides, how could I regret the path that led me to you? Garrett's answering smile warmed her heart as thoroughly as the day they'd met. Even if that path started with you bleeding in a barn? Especially then, she said softly, because that's when you lifted me up and called me your own. Their lips met in a tender kiss as the first stars appeared in the twilight sky. Whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together, 2 souls who had found in each other not just love, but redemption. As summer bloomed across the Colorado landscape, so too did their family with the birth of their daughter, Catherine Grace Irons, named for the sister Garrett had lost and the grace that had brought them together. Watching her husband cradle their newborn daughter with gentle reverence, Zara knew with absolute certainty that the wounds of the past had truly healed, making way for a future brighter than either of them had dared to dream.